Have you ever made a decision that later turned out to be a big mistake? Imagine spending hours on something important, only to realize you were led to wrong path by your own mind. Today, we're going to uncover the hidden traps that can fool even the smartest among us. Stay tuned, because by the end of this video, you'll know how to spot these traps and avoid them for good. Hello, and welcome back to our journey into mental models and smarter thinking. In today's video, we're tackling a big topic: overcoming cognitive traps. We all have mental shortcuts that help us make decisions quickly, but sometimes these shortcuts lead us into errors. We'll explore 3 common traps: confirmation bias, anchoring bias, and survivorship bias. By the end of this video, you'll have simple strategies to see past these traps and make better decisions every day. Let's start with confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we only look for information that backs up what we already believe and ignore anything that challenges it. For example, if you think a certain food is unhealthy, you might only read articles that say it's bad, while skipping over studies that show it has benefits. This bias can keep you from learning new things or hearing different viewpoints. When you only listen to ideas that match your own, you might miss out on important facts that could help you make smarter decisions. Think about a time when you picked a movie just because a few friends gave it good reviews. Later on, you might have wished you had checked other opinions too, only to find that many people didn't like it. Now imagine this happening in business. Many entrepreneurs sometimes make big decisions based only on stories of success. They listen to the winners and ignore the many failures that happened along the way. This can lead to risky decisions because they're not seeing the full picture. A good way to avoid this mistake is to ask yourself, what would someone who disagrees your opinion? This simple question forces you to consider all sides of an issue and make a more balanced choice. Make a list of reasons both support and against your belief. This way, you open your mind to new ideas and avoid falling into the trap of only listening to what you want to hear. Remember, by challenging your own beliefs and seeking out alternative perspectives, you can break free from confirmation bias and make more balanced decisions. Next up is anchoring bias. Anchoring bias happens when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, like an initial number or idea. This anchor then shapes our judgment even if it isn't the best reference. For example, if you're shopping for a new phone and the first price you see is very high, that price becomes your anchor. Even if you later see a better deal, you might still think it's expensive because you're comparing it to that first price. Imagine you're negotiating a salary. If the employer starts with a low offer, that number might stick in your mind. Even if you manage to negotiate a raise, you may end up accepting less than you deserve because you're anchored to the initial figure. Anchoring bias can also affect everyday decisions, like choosing what to spend on groceries or even picking a restaurant for dinner. To overcome anchoring bias, always gather multiple pieces of information before making a decision. Look at several examples or offers and then determine your own value or price. Ask yourself, what would be a fair price if I had no prior information? This approach helps you break free from that first piece of information that might be skewing your judgment. Don't let the first piece of information you get define your expectations. By comparing multiple sources and setting your own standards, you can avoid the trap of anchoring bias and make better, more informed decisions. The third trap we're looking at is survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is when we only focus on the successes and ignore the failures. We see the winners and assume that their path is the right one, even though many others have tried and failed. This bias can give you an overly rosy picture of what it takes to succeed. For instance, you might read about a startup that grew into a huge company, without ever hearing about the many startups that failed because of similar ideas or hard work. Consider the story of famous entrepreneurs. We often hear about the successes of companies like Apple or Amazon, but rarely about the countless businesses that didn't make it. By only focusing on the survivors, we can end up with unrealistic expectations. In your own life, you might look at someone who achieved a goal and think, if they can do it, so can I, without realizing that there were many hidden struggles along the way. To combat survivorship bias, look for the whole picture. When you study a success story, also research the challenges and failures that occurred along the way. Ask, what did the failures teach them? This will give you a more balanced view and help you prepare for the real ups and downs that come with any big endeavor. I used to idolize certain success stories without understanding the full context. Later, I learned about the numerous setbacks these individuals faced before they succeeded. This changed my perspective entirely. I realized that failure is not something to be feared, but a valuable part of the journey. Now, I use the lessons from failures as stepping stones rather than reasons to give up. By recognizing survivorship bias, you can set realistic expectations and learn from both successes and failures. This balanced view can prepare you for the challenges ahead and help you build a resilient mindset. Let's take a moment to see how these three cognitive traps work together and what you can do to overcome them. Confirmation bias. To challenge your own beliefs, try standing in someone else's shoes. Ask yourself, how would someone with an opposite opinion see this? For a couple of seconds, anchoring bias. Gather multiple pieces of information before deciding. Set your own standards rather than sticking to the first number or idea you hear. Survivorship bias. Look for the full story behind every success. Understand that failures are a natural and important part of any journey. By being aware of these traps and using the strategies we've discussed, you can make better decisions and avoid the pitfalls that come from a biased perspective. Imagine you're about to make an important decision, a job change, a new investment, or even a major purchase. Now, picture yourself taking a step back to question your assumptions, comparing multiple sources of information, and looking at both the success stories and the failures. This process gives you a clearer, more balanced view, allowing you to choose the best path forward. Here's a quick exercise for you. Take a decision you're facing right now. Write down the evidence that supports your view. Then write down at least 3 pieces of evidence that oppose it. Next, list the first piece of information you received about this decision, and then compare it with at least 3 other sources. Finally, research a success story related to this decision and also try to find a failure story. Reflect on what you can learn from both. By doing this, you're practicing how to overcome confirmation bias, anchoring bias, and survivorship bias all at once. Let these exercises become a habit, and you'll see a positive shift in the quality of your decisions. Today, we uncovered 3 major cognitive traps: confirmation bias, anchoring bias, and survivorship bias. These biases can sneak into our thinking, but with the right strategies, we can overcome them. I challenge you to use the tips we discussed today the next time you face a big decision. Reflect on your thought process and share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else see things more clearly. If you found this video useful, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with friends who could benefit from smarter decision-making. Stay curious, and remember, by knowing your cognitive traps, you can free your mind to make better choices. See you in the next video as we continue our journey toward genius thinking.